To call Little Town Hero a departure from Game Freak's most recognizable work would be an understatement. I mean, you can't get much further from Pokemon than an RPG that utilizes both board and card game mechanics in its battling systems, can you? But despite its unique blend of battle mechanics, Little Town Hero does manage to trip itself up on occasion. Little Town Hero, as the name implies, is set in a little town that sits isolated from the outside world, protected from its dangers by the forces of the local castle. You play as a curious kid who finds a powerful gem, coinciding with the mysterious appearance of monsters within the town, and it's up to you to be a hero. A little town hero, if you will. For as simple as the setup is, Little Town Hero's plot does actually turn into something really interesting eventually. It's just that it takes its sweet time getting there. Nothing really happens until the final few chapters, and for as weird and interesting as things get in those late stages, it's still pretty predictable overall. Really though, my biggest issue with Little Town Hero's story is how long it takes to actually get anywhere. So much of the game is spent running around town, talking to villagers and doing random busy work, and it's all so boring. The game shines brightest when it throws you into its battles, which is where the mix of card and board game mechanics comes into play, but it only tends to throw you into these battles once or twice per chapter. In the early stages, it throws you into a battle against the same character at least 3 times in a row, which wears thin really quickly. But like I said, I do actually enjoy the combat in Little Town Hero. Each round you have energy that you can spend to turn ideas into actions, or as the game calls them, Izzits and Dazzits respectively. These ideas can take the form of attacks which can be used once per round, blocks that can be used until they're broken, or utility Dazzits which are used once, but often buff your other Dazzits or provide some other effect. So each attack or block Dazzit comes with its own offense and defense stats, which affects how they work against enemy Dazzits. The attack stat will do the indicated number of damage to the opposing Dazzit, while the defense stat will act as the Dazzit's hit points. Once they hit 0, the Dazzit breaks, removing it from your headspace. Each round your goal is to open up your opponent to a body attack, which lowers their total HP. To do this, you have to break all of their Dazzits in a single round, while keeping at least one attack Dazzit on hand to actually inflict the damage. Sometimes enemies will have shields around their body health, but otherwise it's a pretty simple setup. The most complex base element to Little Town Hero's battle system is its use of battle points. If you break your opponent's Dazzits but can't make an attack against them as they sit stunned, you'll gain a battle point. These points can be used to swap out your active Izzits from ones that you have stored in your headspace, or can be spent in a larger number to restore all of your broken Dazzits. These prices increase with use, so it behooves you to finish fights as quickly as possible, though the energy you can spend on ideas increases every few rounds, so there is a bit of neat interplay between systems there. You can also regain all broken Dazzits by losing one of your body hit points, so there can be some strategic merit to simply tanking a hit. Now, Little Town Hero does get a bit more complex as you progress, with board game elements and assists added fairly early on. Each battle takes place on a self-contained map, with rounds moving from location to location. At first, the only benefits you get from landing on certain spaces of the map are new, more powerful Izzits to store in your headspace, or allies who can give you assists, such as letting you turn an Izzit into a Dazzit for free, or changing certain Dazzits on the field. As you fight more and more, the game throws even more elements into the board game section of the battle system. Gimmicks appear that require you to combine certain Dazzits with environmental assists, usually to deal massive damage to an enemy's body health or armor, and more diverse allies appear to give you a hand. Later on, you even have the ability to combine the attack and defense stats of 2 separate Dazzits. I gotta say, for as much as Little Town Hero's battle system is unique, and for as much as I enjoy it, there are some frustrations that are inherent to the card and board game style of play, mostly boiling down to some frustrating RNG. You generally can't plan on where your next round will take place, so planning ahead to make use of certain gimmicks or assists doesn't usually make sense. Additionally, the Izzits that appear to you do so at random, which also hampers any sort of strategy that you might be forming. There are certain elements that allow you to circumvent the RNG, such as Dazzits that allow you to move freely between rounds, or using battle points to swap your active Izzits around, but these are either pretty rare or not very effective. Your ability to strategize is hampered even further by enemy effects that can be downright brutal. Certain enemy Dazzits can destroy your Dazzits without giving you a chance to play them, while others randomize the Dazzit being used against them, completely negating any sense of choice that you might have. Now, these effects can be mitigated somewhat by using the game's order of operations to your advantage. For instance, if an enemy is forcing you to use random Dazzits, you can choose to only have one Dazzit active when the effect triggers, forcing the outcome. Gaming the system like this feels great, but there are some effects that you have to see coming a mile away to prepare for, and in the game's final chapters they can feel pretty unfair. Now, with the game's battle system out of the way, there really isn't all that much to talk about with Little Town Hero. The game has a handful of side quests for you to take part in, but these boil down to pretty simple fetch quests, and considering how slowly you run around the town, searching for them and then running around and completing them feels like it drags on forever. It certainly does not help the game's pacing at all. To the game's credit, you can fast travel between a handful of key locations, but this barely helps. But at least the town itself is nice enough to explore. It's not visually impressive on any level, but the style is charming enough and it's very colourful. I will say that the game's monster designs are really interesting, though it's a shame that there are so few of them. Little Town Hero's sound design doesn't fare quite as well, unfortunately. Its soundtrack isn't bad per se, there just aren't many noteworthy tracks, and the only one that did really stick with me was for all the wrong reasons. And beyond the soundtrack, there's not a whole lot of audio to talk about. There's no voice acting to speak of, with characters conversing in text, accompanied by various beeps and boops. All in all, it's a rather simple affair, but aside from that one music track, none of Little Town Hero's presentation is necessarily bad, so take that for what you will. So, with all that said, Little Town Hero is good. If I'm being perfectly honest, Little Town Hero's story, visuals, and music just aren't much to write home about, but its battle system is unique and fun enough to save it from being a simple affair that drags a little more than it needs to. That said, even that system isn't perfect by any means, what with some excessive RNG coming into play during the harder, more strategy-focused battles, but for the price of admission, Little Town Hero is worth checking out, especially if that one incredibly specific element sounds appealing to you. Now hopefully this marks the end of me having to say the words Izzit or Dazzit ever again.